Atheist Nomads, episode 226, The Week.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin. Lauren is getting her ass kicked by Kylie, but a different Kylie than the one who is joining us today.
I was going to say, wait a minute. I don't remember that. Okay.
Lauren's not feeling well. She's due in like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So it's coming down to the wire, and she might be in for the interview we're doing later today, but not right now. Okay. And so we are joined by Kylie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I had a thought, maybe you had me come on now because Kylie is about to be here, and I was like, that works, fitting. I didn't know if that had something to do with it, or if it was just a coincidence. But... That
was coincidence. It was more, you're an interesting person who lives an interesting life in a shitty place.
That's true. Yeah. That shitty place is true. Yeah. For sure. Yep.
Kylie lives in Ontario, which is the largest city in Malheur County, which is one of the least populated counties in Oregon.
And the poorest, as far as I know. Yeah.
Probably.
And I think it has the highest crime, some kind of crime rate thing.
Yeah. And I lived in the county seat, which is a tenth the size of Ontario, until I was 8. Mm-hmm. And so, interestingly enough, Kylie and I had the same pediatrician.
Right. Yep. Because you were Vale, or was it?
Yeah.
Okay, Vale. Yeah. Which was always the rivalry for Ontario, because you guys got the courthouse, and that made everybody in Ontario pissed, I guess. And so whenever we played football games, it was like, of course, in high school, we had no idea what anybody was mad about, but we're like, So you have to drive to Vale to do anything with the court, which now Vale is so much smaller than Ontario. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's how it works.
Oh, yeah, even when we were kids, it was a 10,000 in Ontario, 1,600 in Vale.
Yeah.
Pretty drastic difference, but Vale was the bigger city when they created the county, so Ontario came around later. Which is weird.
Yeah. I think Ontario's kind of like, in some ways, hit like the borders of how far it can expand, because it's got, unless it starts going towards more the Vale direction, like it's hit, it's got the bridge that goes to Fruitland. We can't go any more that way, so it's kind of like we're running out of room on which ways to expand, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
But,
and you get angry farmers who don't want to give up their farmland.
Yep.
Even though they all keep on selling out to Simplot and their neighbors.
Yeah, there's a lot of the kind of old school mentality in Ontario that still has not. It's like I'm just kind of waiting for a generation to die off, and so we can have some changes go on. But until that happens, I don't know. It's going to kind of stay kind of shitty for a while, I think. That's my opinion. But yeah.
It's not a horrible place.
No.
It's just,
some of the stuff is it's just like dealing with people that have been there forever, and it's always been a certain way, and they don't want it to change, which I understand. If it's good for you, you don't want it to change, but it's not great for everybody, most people. So, yeah.
Well, and it's really interesting compared to Boise, because it's in the Treasure Valley, but it is in a different state, and just weird. It's like Fruitland and Payette fit better with Boise than Ontario does, even though they're literally just separated by a river.
Yeah, well, and then I always get the thing when, well, not people around here, but I talk to people, and they're, well, one, I'll either say, oh, from Ontario, or they're like, oh, Canada, you're Canadian. No, I'm not Canadian. Or you're from California? No, not California. And then nobody knows Ontario, Oregon. Or I'll tell people I live in Oregon. They're like, oh, like Portland? No, and not at all like Portland. So you have to correct people of where I actually live is basically like, and not even like Boise. We're not like Boise. We're not cool like Boise. We're just, So.
Now, of course, Ontario, Oregon was named after Ontario, Canada.
Yes, it was. Actually, I don't know if you knew that, but one of my ancestors, or great, somewhere down the line, it was him and another guy who was Canadian that founded Ontario, and the name was decided by a coin toss, the Canadian one, so it was named Ontario. If it would have been my ancestor, Morfitt was last name, it would have been called Ione, which was his sister's name.
Okay.
So, and when I was little, my grandma got to be in the parade because she was like the descendant of, whoever. So that was always like one of those things I would tell kids in elementary school, like, well, yeah, my great grandpa like created Ontario, and nobody cared, but for me, it made me feel cool. And they had a book that like talked about the history of Ontario, and then somewhere in there it had my name as like, these are the descendants, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, see, my name's in the history book. So it doesn't get you much currency, but it was, as a kid, it was cool. So, yep.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to Dustin off the degree.
Okay.
For this week, we're talking about, well, the week. Yes, seems kind of meta, but it's actually not. So the 7-day week that we all know and love is, if you ask almost any Christian, they're going to tell you, well, it's because of creation.
Oh,
and
right,
it's because of Genesis 1. That's why we have the 7-day week. No, that's not why. It actually turns out there's not really any good evidence as to where the Jewish 7-day week came, as long as, well, unless you accept the literal 7-day creation recently.
Right.
Other than that, there's no reason for why the Jews had a 7-day week that is documented. For the Romans, it is well documented.
Really? Okay.
And it's their 7-day week that we follow, just like it's the Roman day that we follow, not the Jewish day. And it's the Roman year we follow, not the Jewish year. And it's all because before the Julian calendar, the Romans followed a modified lunar calendar. And pretty much everybody around the world had lunar calendars at that point. It was the most obvious way to count something shorter than a year.
Right.
And with the year, you've got an obvious start or stop point at either the winter solstice or the spring equinox. One or the other is your start or stop point. And those tended to be the two places that were picked. Occasionally it would drift, like our current calendar is off. It is wrong. In my opinion, it is exactly 10 days wrong.
Yeah. Okay. I've never even thought about that. Like, we're shifted off. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what's even worse is we're actually 2 months off. February was originally the last day of the year.
Oh, really?
Or the last month of the year, which is why it's the short one. It was the one just to make it up,
right,
so that it would actually coincide.
Right, to catch up to where they needed to be. And then, okay, interesting.
But anyway, so you had the 28-day lunar month. And with a 28-day month, if you divide that by 4, you have 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the Romans wanted to have 4 market days per month. And so every 7 days was a market day.
Right.
And so the week was a 6-day work week and then a market day.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Work in your fields, you're making stuff, and then you take it to market.
Right. Yeah.
The Jews went with a little bit different approach of you work 6 days and then you have a day off.
This is the Sabbath, right? Yeah.
A day where you can't buy or sell or do any work. At least with the Romans, you had a day where you go to town and you do stuff.
So when would the Jewish people do that part? Because they're working all the rest of the time.
I don't know. Probably much less organized.
Yeah.
The Romans were big on organizing everything. And so that was one of the things they organized.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, no, I that's one of those things that, like, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that. It's kind of like, this is what we do. It's, other than, I get having this time that you're like, okay, we need to have an idea of like, I'm going to meet you here so that we can kind of get there at the same time generally. But other than, it's like, other than that, I thought like, well, this is just, I guess if you don't ever really think about it, you don't think about like, why is it this way? And then I did probably until now really think it, like, connect it to the creation story of being 7 days. Yeah. And then, but then there's always the controversy of is the Sabbath Saturday or is it Sunday? Because that was always kind of a contested thing.
We will get to that as well.
Okay. All right.
But so, yeah, so the Romans, they actually were as good as they were at organizing everything and trying to create structure. Pre-Caesar, they were terrible at being consistent because they had the intercalary month. This was just this extra 2 weeks to make the lunar month fit with the solar month. And they were terrible at actually using it. They would put it off for quite a while, then they would bring it back in.
Well, then how would anybody stay coordinated then? That it's like, unless did they tell people? They're just
yeah. They would just announce out,
okay,
we're skipping it this year.
That doesn't seem like a very efficient system. Yeah.
And before the Julian calendar went in, I think they'd skipped the interoculary for it was something like 10 years straight.
Huh.
So the calendar was already a couple months off, and they had to repeat months to actually get it back in line.
Wow.
Because the lunar year does not match with the solar year.
Mm-hmm. So where does leap year come in?
That came in with how to make it actually line up.
Okay.
Which
every 4 years you add the extra day.
Unless it is a year divisible by 100 that is not divisible by 400.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like the I before E except after C, but it really is not the rule because nobody knows how it works.
Well, and it's necessary because the solar year is 365.25, actually 246 days.
Uh-huh.
And that's not easily divisible.
Right, okay.
And so with the Julian calendar, it was fine for a few centuries, but by, 1,500 years later...
Right, you're off. Okay.
You're about a month off.
Wow.
And so they had to drop... So that's where the Gregorian calendar came in,
mm-hmm.
where you skip the leap year on the first year of every century, unless it is a year divisible by 400.
Right.
So the year 1900 was not a leap year.
Mm-hmm.
The year 2000 was. The year 2100 won't be.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that brings it into where we won't be off by more than a day for something like 50,000 years.
Well, my birthday is March 1st, so it was always like every leap year I had to wait a little bit longer. So, yeah. But I always thought it would have been cool if I would have been born. If I would have been born on leap year, I would have been on the 29th, but I wasn't. So, yeah.
So Sunday was the first day of the Roman week, the day of the sun, which was followed by the day of the moon, Monday,
right?
You had the counting of the days matching up between the Roman and the Jewish calendars, which makes perfect sense because you're going with starting with a lunar month, which always starts with the new moon. And if you're counting from the start of that, 7, and then 7, and then 7, and then 7, you're always going to be matching up.
Right.
Because you're always starting at the same starting point. So those two being the same is probably purely coincidental. And the Jews worshipped on their day of worship was the seventh day of the week, the Sabbath. They claim that it is because that's when God rested at the end of creation.
Right.
More accurately would be they had figured out that taking a day off is actually good.
Right.
And
which if you think about it, why would God need to rest? Like, does God need to replenish? Like he gets tapped out? I don't know how that works.
Supposedly it was so that to set an example for people to take breaks.
Oh, okay. Right. Leading by example, which if you did that with the rest of God stuff, then we, because most of the time he's like telling us, don't do what I'm doing because it's bad when you do it, but I can do it. So.
Yeah. So the Jews had the Sabbath on Saturday. If you look at the Gospels, they have Jesus and his disciples keeping the Sabbath. They have direct argumentation against the way the Sabbath was being kept at the time, but no, don't worship on Sabbath. If you get into the Pauline epistles, you have Paul going to the synagogues on the Sabbath. You've got meetings happening Friday night and Saturday, which is all the Sabbath, which is also worth noting. The Roman day and the Jewish day are different. We follow the Roman day. The Jewish day was sundown to sundown. That works if you're close to the equator because it's 6 o'clock every single day. It doesn't work the further from the equator you get.
Right.
The Roman Empire got rather large. That would not have made sense. They went with the middle of the night back to the middle of the night because at that middle point, you can always calculate it because you know when the sun sets and you know when the sun rises.
Right.
The halfway point is midnight.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be sleeping, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
But anyway, so Christians were continuing to keep the Sabbath. By the 2nd century, the Christian services had turned into a basically full weekend affair with prayers on Friday, fasting on Sabbath, with meetings, and then a celebration feast on Sunday, celebrating Christ's resurrection.
So every week they were doing that?
Every single week.
Wow.
The Romans were persecuting Jews, and Christians were wanting to not be confused for Jews.
Okay.
So they started to keep the whole Sabbath part quieter, make that more private, less public, and wanted to be distinct from the Jews.
Okay, yeah.
Also, if you have a day that you're fasting and a day that you're feasting, which one are you going to want to keep if you drop one?
Right, yeah. A little bit more fun to have the party. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Muslims also tie their day of worship off of the same basic system. According to the Quran, Muhammad chose Friday because it is the best day because that's the day that God created man.
Oh, okay. But man, but not woman?
It was all about Adam. That was the day that God created Adam, therefore it is the best day.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And realistically, Muhammad knew about Jesus. He was a fan of Jesus. He knew Christians and had studied with Christians. He knew Jews and had studied with Jews. And he wanted to be distinct from Christians and Jews. So Saturday and Sunday were out.
Right.
So he picked Friday.
Right. Yeah. That does all make sense. Then we ended up having, and I feel like it was that way in a lot of churches now. We have Sunday service and then Wednesday. For whatever reason, Wednesday nights were always like, that's when everybody else goes to church. That's probably has no connection to anything in that way, but it was like, Sundays night or Sunday in the morning, and then if you're really into it, you would probably go Sunday night too, and then Wednesday nights was like the other time that you went. So
midweek Bible study.
Yeah, youth group kind of thing. Yeah, that's what it was.
Not tied to anything really. It just is so with Christians, Sunday was the sole day of worship from about late 2nd century all the way through to probably 1700s. When you started getting some people following the Seventh-day Sabbath again. You've got the Seventh-day Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, Church of God Seventh-day, Branch Davidians, and there's a number of other groups.
So the Seventh-day, they're doing Sunday or they're doing Saturday?
Saturday.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I don't know. But coming my background, coming from a non-denominational kind of thing, none of that ever made sense to me about like, why is it that big of a deal? Like, where you're getting real mad about something that, but and then it's interesting to talk to people that like that was a big reason they got into fights, with other people, and I'm like, okay, seems like a little bit trivial to be dividing your church on, but maybe that's just because I was in the non-denominational thing, so it's just like we didn't really talk about all that much. I didn't even know that there was that many things that divided churches really until I got older. So
now, of course, in terms of pure numbers, we're talking about 2 billion Christians that go to church on Sunday, and there's probably not more than 20 or 25 million that go to church on Saturday, with the exception of Catholics, who often do Saturday night mass.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right about the time the sun is setting on Saturday. And that ends up being one of the more common services, but Catholics tend to do mass 2 or 3 times every single day. Yeah.
I went to a Catholic school growing up, not because we were Catholic, but because it was the only private school in Ontario and also religious. So I think my parents were like, it's Christian-ish, so, send them there. But we had to go to mass every Friday morning, and I hated it because it was like so different from the church that I went to where, like the reciting back things and the standing up and sitting down. I was just like, did not like it at all. But then I think it's 2nd grade when they do the confirmation thing around that age. And of course I wasn't Catholic. So all of my friends that went there that were Catholic, they went through that and they started to go up and get communion. And I was like, screw that, I'm going up. So I started going up with them for a while. And then one of the nuns told me I couldn't. And I was like, so that made me dislike the whole thing even more. Cause I just sit there and they got to go up and get the little, even though the wafers were not all that great, it was just like, I wanted to get in line and get it. But yeah. So, I think I went to Catholic school until 5th grade. So we had the nuns, and it wasn't like one of the ones where they're like, smacking us with rulers and stuff all the time. It wasn't that, but definitely.
Well, by that point, that was illegal in Oregon.
Right. That's probably true. Yeah.
That was, I think they banned corporal punishment in schools in like 1991, 1992, somewhere around there.
In Oregon. I think they still can do it in Texas and some places.
Yeah, there's still a couple states.
Yeah, because I was reading an article and they were talking about like a 14-year-old girl getting, I'm like, and then the controversy was not that she was getting some kind of physical, it was that they had a teacher of the opposite sex doing it. And I'm like, well, that's even more. How are you still doing this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when her parents found out, they were like, hey, I'm like, yeah, exactly. Wait, that doesn't, but Texas, sometimes I don't understand.
Adventists love pointing out that the Russians tried to go to a 10-day decimal week at one point, and it failed.
10-day what? Decimal?
Yeah, decimal. So going to a base 10 instead of a base 7.
Oh, okay.
I think they were also trying to go to a base 10 year, so 10 months instead of 12 months.
So which months did they kick out?
Well, it never really went anywhere.
Oh.
And the real point of going to a 10-day week was to get 9 days straight of work.
Wow.
And as it turns out, the more days people work, the less productive they are.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's like Henry Ford famously discovered that when you dropped people from working 6 days to 5, you got more work out of them. And then when you cut from 48-hour weeks to 40-hour weeks, you also got more work out of them. And he kept cutting down how many hours people worked and got more work done.
Right, yeah.
And so, yeah, of course, if you go to expecting people to work 8 days straight or 9 days straight and then get a day off,
right,
that's not going to work well.
Yeah.
People aren't going to be happy and they're going to go back to the shorter week.
Right, yeah.
Working 6 days straight, most people can handle.
Yeah.
It still sucks. It's less productive, but it is doable. So the next time, or if an Adventist ever tries to pull any of that shit on you, let them know that's because they're overworking people. That's why they weren't happy with it.
Right, yeah.
If they'd gone to a 10-day week where you worked 4 days, got a day off, worked 4 days, get a day off, people would probably love that. That would work.
Well, yeah, it'd be like when you can have people that work, like my ex-husband worked at the SRCI and as a correctional officer, and they would be able to do like 4 10s and then have like 3 days off. And like that, he did that as much as possible because it's like you can put in the extra hours at once if you've got like 3 days off. It's a lot better. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think giving people the opportunity to not work as much is probably smarter. But,
all right, let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll be back with news. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by Archway Hosting. Check out their low-price, full-featured hosting solutions at archwayhosting.com. That's ARCHWAY hosting.com. We're also brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how you can become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's patreon.com/atheistnomads. And we got a donation, I think 2 days ago. Wishing you all the best with the new baby. I tossed you a donation in lieu of a baby gift. Hope it helps you bridge the gap in case you aren't able to put out the show for a while.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll be here when you are back. Regards, Rob. Grateful listener.
Cool.
Thank you, Rob. I've got enough episodes banked with interviews that I think we should be fine. There's always a chance, though, that it's not quite going to work out.
I think everyone will understand if you have like maybe a couple weeks that you're busy with the baby. I think that's understandable. Yeah. So the goal is to not miss anything. If it happens, though, it happens. So anyway, we have news. First off, the Trump administration is lifting the ban on elephant trophies being imported into the U.S. Okay.
So this will allow trophy hunters like Trump's sons to go to Zimbabwe and Zambia. Those are the only two countries where he's lifting this ban. Those are places where his sons go to do trophy hunting, and then you can bring back the trophy like the elephant head.
See, I thought you were going to say something about the travel ban, like it's something important. No, it's just letting them go and kill animals and bring,
it's one of those that it's just further example of how shitty of a person Trump is.
Yeah. Like we needed more examples, but yeah. And how much it's really, like, I think it illustrates how kind of out of touch with, like most people would look at that and be like, that's really not the most important thing going on right now, dude. But it's, to him, I'm sure he's like, this is important. We got to do this. And yeah. So just another illustration of, I think, with how out of touch he is with reality or what actually needs to be going on. He's kind of in his own little reality show and he is the center of it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those where, you know, the whole ban on allowing people to import elephant trophies is to discourage people going and doing trophy hunting.
Right. Yeah.
You do trophy hunting so you can bring back the trophies.
Well, doing trophy hunting in general, or just like for like because they have the problem for the ivory and all that, they're trying to discourage that. But you're talking about just trophy hunting in general. They're trying to get.
Well, so there's a combination of trying to discourage that kind of trophy hunting, at least with the really big, intelligent animals.
Right.
There is also the ivory trade aspect, because the main thing people are going to bring back is ivory, which there is a global ivory embargo. So you're not supposed to be shipping that around.
Right, yeah.
So if you fly from Zimbabwe to the US through Germany and Germany finds elephant tusks, they're going to seize them.
Yeah. And then what do they do with them?
Destroy them.
Gosh. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've seen the pictures of like, they just like this huge, magnificent animal that it's just, they just killed it to cut these things off, and that's it. And that's disgusting. And, I don't really I'm not against necessarily hunting. Like that's not my thing, but I just don't understand like why we need to go and destroy animals that this is not benefiting you except for something to stick on your wall. That's it. Like, and how is that justifiable in any sense, really? Especially because they don't I don't know. I guess if you're like, is it okay if it's sportsmanlike, instead of just, I don't know. I guess that's a debate I don't really have that much to say on, but it just seems to me like this is just people being shitty and doing something because they can. It has no real justification other than that, I think.
It's a gift to the super rich who have their own private planes,
right,
where they can skip going through customs, flying through other countries.
Right, yeah.
This is only for the super, super rich. Granted, the only people who do trophy hunts in Africa are the super, super rich.
Yeah, yeah. And then they can get it. So, yeah, they don't really have to do much. They go there and then it's all set up. They just kind of like, here, you stand here and you pull the trigger when the thing goes by. And then, so.
Now, Zimbabwe and Zambia both allow hunting elephants. They charge you a hefty fee to do it, and they use that money to help support conservation efforts.
A little backwards, but...
Yeah. There's also just the fact that elephants are incredibly intelligent creatures with very complex societies, and they mourn the loss of a family member for decades.
Yeah. Well, and I was watching a video about like, I think it was Japan, could be wrong, but like that doesn't have some of the rules that I guess in the US that we have in terms of like zoos and keeping animals, like how they have to be treated. And so they have these elephants that have been kept in because elephants are very social creatures and they've been kept in isolation. And so they've kind of watched these elephants, and they have like basically neurotic behavior to where they will be like rocking back and forth and like banging their heads on things like you would think to see a human who had been in like solitary confinement, or, like these children that have been put in attics or whatever their whole life. It's like, they're basically being held and tortured in a ways like they don't have. It's not like a goldfish who really doesn't need people, doesn't need other goldfish in there, but like elephants, that is part of what they need to thrive. And like, but they haven't been kept in those. And it's like, for like, I think it was like 15, 16 years, some of them, that they've never been around other elephants. So they can't let them to be around them again because they wouldn't have any idea how to interact. But it's just, sad. And then it's like, why did we even do that in the first place? Just so we could go through and pay money to look at them. And yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
That is shitty. Shitty. There is a very bizarre and meaningless measure that's been added to the GOP tax bill. This tax bill is ridiculous. Not just in the fact that it is a huge gift to the rich. It is they have put every imaginable shitty thing they can into it, and more keep on being found.
Mm-hmm.
This particular one is a declaration of fetal personhood.
Oh, okay. I think I know. I think I heard of this vaguely. Yeah. So
yeah, it is a tax bill, so they can only do it in a way that actually fits with taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they are doing it is by allowing you to open a college savings account with the tax benefits in the name of a fetus.
Unborn. Oh, man.
As a person.
Wow.
So they're having to declare a fetus a person to allow putting it into the fetus's name, which then brings up the whole issue of those all need to be tied to social security numbers. And
which don't exist until they're born.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't get a social security number until you have a birth certificate.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And add to it, it is incredibly meaningless because parents can people without children, not pregnant, years before you have kids, you can open up a child college savings account in your name.
Right.
And then when you have a kid born, you can transfer it to the child.
Right. Yeah.
So this doesn't provide any benefit. It doesn't do anything to actually change anything in function.
Mm-hmm.
All it does is create some legal precedent.
Right. It's just slipping it in there to be like, yeah, this like more ways to undermine the whole thing and be like, this is a person, which it doesn't. I mean, like that's not even something people would normally pay attention to, really, to be connected to that issue, which is really kind of slimy and manipulative when you think about it. So,
oh yeah, absolutely slimy and manipulative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ah, man. And then for one closer to home, we have Idaho GOP Representative Raul Labrador,
right?
Tea Party douchebag of Idaho's 1st congressional district.
We do have some good names for around here, like Butch Otter and Labrador. I mean, it seems like we've got that going for us. I don't know.
Well, okay, you've got Butch Otter. You've got Little as the lieutenant governor.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Risch, or Rich. We have Mike Crapo.
Sorry, every time I see that, I laugh, and I'm like, I'm a 12-year-old, but
so
I still do.
Basically, Idaho politics. If you just tweak the names a little bit, little crappy bitches.
That's awesome.
That's Idaho politics. It's a bunch of little crappy bitches.
Yep. Don't they have there's a beer that is what is it called?
Little Bitch Otter.
Yeah. Which I think is
really,
awesome.
really bitter IPA called Little Bitch Otter.
Yeah, we might as well have something good come out of it.
Yeah. Anyway, so Labrador is now running for governor. So he's done with Congress. Butch Otter is finally going to retire at the end of his 3rd term. He is probably well on his way into full-on dementia at this point, from everything I've heard. And it is amazing he hasn't been charged with any federal corruption charges yet because of the number of very corrupt things he has been involved with.
Right.
But anyway, Labrador is about as shitty as they get. And he is now touting the endorsement he got from the pastor of a Coeur d'Alene church.
Okay. That in itself is like, why should that mean anything for you? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So he went and he spoke at an event that was at the Candlelight Christian Fellowship in Coeur d'Alene. And
what's the population of Coeur d'Alene?
40,000.
Okay. All right.
And Pastor Paul Van Noy told everybody about how he's such a great, a good Christian, and how they all should go vote for him. Yeah.
And that's it? That was the entire endorsement?
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it is, I guess, sad and kind of telling that probably does mean something to a lot of people, that this guy is a good Christian. That means therefore he will make a good governor. That's sadly, I think, all the thought that goes into it for a lot of people.
Yeah, the press release that Labrador's campaign put out quoted Van Noy as saying, "As Christians, we have an ethical responsibility to engage in stewardship of our state by voting. Our faith requires a stewardship of support for leaders who share our Christian values, one who lives by a strong and true moral compass. The stewardship of our God-given freedoms depends on this, and I know that rural Labrador will defend religious freedom and fight those who would subvert the Judeo-Christian values upon which our nation was founded."
Wow. I thought that where's the part about not being able to endorse political candidates? They can do that if it's not in the church service, they can do it, or?
They are claiming this was a pastor speaking as a private individual.
I see. Not telling his congregation to do it. He was just saying, I guess.
This was a pastor speaking to people in attendance at an event in his church building.
Right. So
they were holding a campaign rally in his church, and he made an endorsement in his church. This is clearly illegal. This is exactly what the Johnson Amendment is all about. And it is horrible that that same shitty tax bill that we already talked about wants to get rid of that.
Yeah. Even
though it's not even being enforced.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We at least need to have it on the books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I remember it was always just kind of assumed, at least at the church that I went to, that there was very much a dividing line which ended up being like Republican and then Democrat. But like, it was like, if you're pro-choice, you're automatically not going to be voted for, period. That was the deciding factor, which usually tended to fall like Republican, Democrat, not always, but yeah. So I don't remember it ever being talked about like candidates per se, but they would talk about the issues and you would know this is where you were supposed to fall with it. So they tried to stay within the, but.
Right. Yeah. And churches are allowed to talk about political issues that fit within their morals and values.
Right.
They are not allowed to endorse parties or candidates.
Right. Yeah.
There is a big difference there.
Well, and I think like if you talk about larger, it's like with Trump, you see when people get so like locked in on these specific issues, then it's even easier to manipulate them if you have no problem with saying the words that need to be said to get elected, which I feel like that's exactly what Trump did. He, like, can anyone really look at him and be like, he's a model Christian? Like he gives a shit about any of that? No. But he said what he needed to say to get those people being like, yes, he's going to do this. And then, so which is very dangerous if that's how people vote, just based on, oh, this guy is or is not aligned with my religious beliefs. That means as if that means anything about them. So, yeah. Like there was in Ontario, because we're in Oregon, so they which is not last year, I think year before. Anyway, when they legalized marijuana, and then there's been the whole in Malheur County. There's been it's legal, but they don't have dispensaries yet. They've blocked that. So, and then there's been all sorts of city council things of still people in Ontario trying to block the dispensaries because they're saying it's going to bring the bad element to whatever. It's like the gateway. They're still trying to have these arguments about it when it's like, it's over. Just get over it, move on. And one of the things at one of these city council meetings was a pastor that came and had like some petition signed by like 6 or 7 pastors that are saying like, these pastors feel like this is not a good thing. And I'm thinking, who cares what the pastors think about it? Really? Why does this hold any weight that you don't think that this should be here? And then, but it does. And then the city council people, there was another candidate in Ontario that basically all they ran on was the fact that they were anti-marijuana. That was it. And like, that's what they ran on. Like all their signs just said basically something about like, pot is bad, pot's evil, and they got elected. I don't know that anyone knew anything about them other than that. And it's just like, yeah, when it becomes a one issue thing, you can have them smuggling all this other shit in there with their policies but some people are just paying attention to that one thing. And then, so that's
initially with that, when Ontario was considering whether or not to allow sales, a bunch of county sheriffs from Idaho that went over and said, please don't allow it.
Oh, because they didn't want all the Idahoans going.
Right, because if they had pot dispensaries in Ontario, 90% of that pot would all be bought by people in Boise and Nampa.
Which everyone just drives through and goes to Huntington. But, and really the thing of it is, if Ontario stands to fix a lot of problems, if they would, because there's like, we can't keep the aquatic center open. There's all this stuff that they're trying to institute a 1% sales tax in Ontario because that's going to fix all these problems they've had. I'm like, well, how about we just, sell pot and then have all this income that we, but nobody wants to do that. Because if they could get it in Ontario, people wouldn't bother driving all the way to Huntington. But I think eventually, like I said, after a certain group of people get older and are not necessarily in the city council part, or when the amount of money that we are losing out on piles up, then people will shift. But until then, we'll see. So, because I think any of the younger generation, like, they're like, it's just it's a non-issue at this point, really. It's like, just like gay marriage. And it's like, really, like, my oldest daughter's 14, and like, she doesn't get it. She's like, why would people care? Why would they care about, if people love people, they get married. And so I think, like, growing up in this generation now, it's not even going to be an issue that we have to really fight for in a while. But it's like kind of fighting against the ones that grew up with that, like, kind of entrenched an idea. And so eventually it's not going to be a problem. But right now it sucks because there's a lot of people that could benefit from being able to, in Idaho too, to be able to use marijuana instead of opiates, so that kind of thing, which, So.
All right, moving on. There is a town in Indiana, Fremont, with a elementary school that advertises religious activities in their newsletter. There is
in the school newsletter? Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Elementary school newsletter. So they promote a Bible club. Now, for clubs at an elementary school, students aren't really old enough to run clubs.
Right. So it's adults,
elementary school. It's teachers that are running them.
Right.
All clubs in any school has to have a faculty sponsor. So there's definitely a teacher involved.
Not like in high school when the students create it and lead it and all that. Right.
Yeah. So obviously it's being run by the school.
Right.
It's being hosted at the school and is taking place during the school day.
Wow. So the teachers are getting paid to do this. Yeah.
It's happening during recess.
And do which kids opt in to do that?
The ones with signed permission forms from their parents.
Which their parents are like, you have to do this. Oh, that would suck. I can't go to recess. I got to go that would really suck.
Oh, they even do more than that. There is also a religious club that meets at the Fremont Methodist Church. And the school is handing out and collecting registration forms from students for this club at a private church.
Yeah, I think I've heard of. Is there a specific program that they're doing? Because I think I might have heard. If it is, I've heard in a roundabout thing that they do this.
I don't know what program it is, but it's.
But there's like that they do it and they kind of talk about. Now it's totally escaping me, but there is a book that a lady wrote that was kind of like, because the idea is that I think the churches have caught on that if you don't get kids when they're younger, if you don't get them into this thing and get them kind of indoctrinated, you're not going to get them when they're getting to, like, if you're not getting them interested or talking to them about this stuff until they're high school, college age, very rarely are they going to be like gung-ho about it. You got to get them when they're little before they have the critical thinking skills to know this is not real. So then that's why they target like the VBSs and the church camps and all that. You do it when there's not the ability for a kid to separate between, the logical, rational stuff and the emotional part. Because, I went to church camp and all that stuff growing up, and, you have the parts where everybody's just like crying and being touched by God or whatever. You're just doing it because everybody around you is doing it. You have no ability to realize that you're being manipulated emotionally. And I mean, that happens with adults too, but with kids even more so. And so I think they do that. They create those kinds of experiences. And actually, when I watched, if you've seen the Jesus Camp documentary,
I haven't actually watched it.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember what kind of church you grew up in. If it was more of if it was a
Adventist.
Okay. Which is, see, I don't even know what those terms are. Like Adventist, like what would you guys do? Like, did you have like the speaking in tongues, laying on of hands? Okay.
Nope.
So that was part of our culture. Like we had people that went up to the Toronto blessing and then carried that blessing back, and then people started falling over when you prayed for them and speaking in tongues and all that. So it was that was part of it, and that's part in the Jesus Camp thing. That's it very much the emotionally charged feeling of the services, even at church camp when I was like not elementary school. That's what was going on, and now I look at it from an outsider's perspective. I'm like, it seems so manipulative and abusive in a way. Like I wouldn't say that in saying that, like, I feel like the people that the adults involved were not necessarily aware totally of what they were doing, and that they were doing what everybody else was doing, but it is emotionally manipulative and abusive because children are being manipulated to have these responses, and then they're told that these responses mean God. This is, and then they can't separate those things until later. Yeah, and it's I feel like that is part of the problem, because when you do get kids in there that, and then you're also preying on kids that maybe don't have a great home life, and so you're telling them, you come here and like, look, you feel good when you're here because you have people paying attention to you, and you have people saying it's all going to be okay, and we'll support you. But also all this other shit comes with it, and so they want the social piece, and they want the support and the friendship and the kind of sense of family, and so they kind of have to take the other stuff, even if it doesn't totally make sense to them. They go ahead and do that too. So it seems underhanded in a way to me. At this point, it does. I mean, it was just part of the everyday thing that you did at church, but now it bothers me when I see that kind of stuff going on. So Didn't they have the Satan? There's a couple different places where it was like, there was they would like have coloring books, and they'd be like, okay, if you guys are going to do that, then you also need to do this, which I think is fair, So either don't do it at all, or let us put ours in there. And if you looked at the Satanist, whatever, the coloring book or whatever, it was totally innocuous. Like there was nothing nothing bad about it, but just the fact that it said Satan on it is everybody's freaking out. So yeah.
All right, time for another break, and then we'll wrap up the news. We love hearing from our listeners. You can email us at contact@atheistnomads.com, tweet us @atheistnomads, send us a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com/atheistnomads, or better yet, call us and leave us a message at 541-203-0666. We might even play it on the show. You can also help us out by leaving us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast directory of choice. We got a tweet from Tomas at Full Metal Camera. Great segment on schisms in the last episode. To heresy, I wanted to mention the words etymology, namely the Greek heretikos, meaning one able to choose. Leave it to Christoids to be able to take a positive concept and pervert it to its current meaning.
I like it.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Australian people have finished up their plebiscite, a non-binding referendum on should they legalize same-sex marriage. And they overwhelmingly, at 61%, voted yes.
So what has been the response to that? It's been...
well, at this point, there's been a lot of people who have been happy. There have been a few that have been upset. And there is some impatience for when the government will actually legalize it.
Right.
This is a non-binding referendum.
Oh, okay.
Which means it doesn't do anything.
Right.
This was the way that the the parliament could ask the people what they want, spend millions of dollars asking the people what they want.
Right. But not be committed to have to do anything with it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like taking a survey and then may or may not. Yeah. Well, I guess it's not that great when you look at it in that light.
This is about on par with the Brexit vote.
Yeah.
Which was also a non-binding referendum. They are going through with it.
Right.
When the people vote especially in the Australian case here, with 61% voting yes, and only 38% voting no, you better follow that or you're in trouble.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would think so.
In, let's see, this one is also, this one's Ohio. State legislator Wes Goodman was a Republican anti-LGBT, quote, family values conservative who has just resigned from his position after he got caught having sex with a man in his office.
Oh, wow. Okay. He was anti-LGBT, also family values. So I'm assuming he's married.
Yep.
So, wow. In his office too. Wow. Yep. He was going for the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Gosh. Wow. Well, and he got caught by who? Like secretary walks in or
somebody caught him.
I feel like how was you didn't like plan? There could have been some planning there, like to think maybe we shouldn't do this here now in the middle of the lunch break. Like I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just too good. You gotta love it when right-wing douchebags screw up. And what's so hilarious is it always seems to be when right-wing conservatives get caught in some kind of a sex scandal, it's either man-on-man action or rape. Right, yeah. Well, I was thinking like Ted Haggart. I don't know if you remember Ted Haggart. He had the church in Colorado Springs, I think, and was very anti LGBT, and got caught with a guy saying that he paid him, had drugs and sex, and then of course what always happens they're like deny it for a little bit, then it's like, okay, crap, I got to admit to this, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to go be counseled or Christian counseling. Basically, they disappear for a little bit, and then it's like, come back, it's good, we're done, And then sometimes they won't even do the reconciliation, is what it's called, within the Christian thing. They won't even really do that. It's like, and like Mark Driscoll is kind of similar, like where you do all this stuff, and then everybody's like, okay, that's not cool, and they're like, okay, it's like going through this it's not even, there's no justice, there's no anything. It's like, okay, we'll just say sorry and God forgives me now, so everybody needs to shut up about it and let me do what I want to do. It's kind of, which is no remorse. There's no actual understanding of what you did. It's just like you want people to stop talking about it is what they want. So, and then they go on and have another career doing whatever it is they're doing. Like Mark Driscoll is now back doing what he was doing, and he's got like a blog on Pathos, and which pissed a bunch of people off, rightly so. And Now in Goodman's case, there is actually people suggesting they have video of this. Right. Well, I don't know, would that make a difference? It's like, how was that Peter Popoff back, whenever they got caught, like there was no other way that he could have been caught in a more like, okay, this was happening way. And now he's back at it now. Yeah. He sells like holy water in the mail or something like that. Yeah. He does that kind of thing. He went quiet for a little while and then came back. Yeah. And then Jim Baker. Yeah. Same thing. And he went to prison for however long, and now he's back doing the same kind of thing. A former Mormon bishop has actually started a petition calling on an end of the practice of Mormon bishops questioning children about sex and masturbation and porn and all of that. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. And then he just suggested it or just proposed this whole thing? He has proposed that they stop this practice. He has started a petition to get more people to call on them to stop this practice. He's outlined the risks of this. Right. Considering that this starts with kids as young as 8. Yeah. Yeah. No, I have friends that were within the Mormon, guys usually will go on their mission, and they're like 18 or whatever when they start this process. And one of my friends was telling me about that before he was going on his mission, and the bishop, or it's not bishop, right? And he was asking him about something, and he admitted to him that he had masturbated, and it like delayed his mission for like 8 months. And I was like, why did you just
say no, I didn't, and then too, it's like, that is, I can't imagine having to like detail that kind of stuff to an old man like that. There's got to be some kind of element of that they enjoy being able to ask those questions and have to make people uncomfortable by talking about them. There's a not okay element to the entire thing.
Well, and it is creepy enough when it's a 40, 50-year-old man alone in a room with a 10-year-old boy.
And then from
8-year-old girl.
Yeah, from what I've also heard, it's like they don't just ask you. You have to go into detail, and you have to tell them what you did and what you were thinking about. And it's like that, to do that there's no need for that. And then also it's like, that is even like, that is, I don't know if you'd call it assault, but that's a violation on a level that is not okay to do to kids, to anybody really. But I mean, to kids especially, Yeah.
He outlines the potential harm of this, including suicide, attempted suicidal ideation, inappropriate shame and guilt, self-loathing, both as a child and adult, normalizing children to sexual questions by adult men, grooming.
That's true, yeah.
Sexual abuse, impaired sexual relations after marriage, and years of recovery from childhood shaming, often lasting decades.
Yeah. So when was this proposed?
Quite recently.
It'll be interesting to see if that goes anywhere.
October 31st.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if it goes anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't, but that would be amazing if it did, because there's some of that within all religious stuff has some element that controls and represses sexuality, but and Christianity as well. It was definitely the culture or the feeling of guilt and shame that goes around sexuality starts very young, and it perpetuated. And then youth group is a very specific time, because when you're hitting puberty, adolescence, and then it's like, I felt like at that point it was like that was all we talked about was not letting the girls don't wear things that are going to cause the boys to stumble. You can't wear tank tops and two-piece swimming suits and stuff like that, because you don't want to be a stumbling block which is so fucked up and backwards. But that was and that people still have that mentality a lot. But yeah, it's just like, and then even after you get out of that, having not been a believer for almost 3.5 years now, there's still like these ingrained kind of responses to feel responsible for people, like guys' reactions when you, like even myself, like if I'm somewhere and a guy says something or does something inappropriately, I'm like, oh, well, I was at a bar, or I was talking to him, or I was kind of flirty. It's like you have this, you can get rid of the religious part of it, but you don't get rid of all those ideas that have been, and those are societal too. It's not just religion, but it's just, yeah. So you start kids young, and you're, I feel like it's not teaching, which religion does a lot. It creates unhealthy, or the inability for people to have personal autonomy and boundaries. It just it pushes these boundaries into places that shouldn't be. Like evangelizing is basically violating boundaries, social boundaries. Like nobody else do you go up in the middle of their lunch and be like, hey, can I tell you about Jesus? They're like, no, I'm eating my hamburger. Leave me alone. You don't do that with other things, really, except for religion or some of the other like more radical. Like, and I remember when I was in youth group, when we would do these evangelistic things, I always felt uncomfortable. Like, I felt like I don't want to go up to somebody when they're in the 7-Eleven and be like, yeah, God told me that he loves you. And like, you don't want to do that. But the religious part of it is like, well, you have to, because if you don't and they go to hell, you're going to feel real bad watching them burn, but it's like, so it's a way for people to bypass social boundaries that we do have in most things, but gives you an excuse to do this stuff. Yeah. So like this, and it gives people, I'm not saying that like every bishop in the Mormon church is a pervy guy that wants to ask these questions, but it gives them people, especially people that are like that, they get a pass to do that, and they can do it, and they can do it in a way that's like, if you don't let them, then you're being the bad one. And it's yeah, that whole thing is very repressive and not okay. And so it'll be interesting to see if that goes anywhere.
Yeah. Alrighty. One final story. We have, I think, yet to discuss this weird rise of flat earthers.
A rise in where, like on
in
YouTube? I know they're on
not being embarrassed.
Oh yeah, there's and I don't know how if you're connected like on the YouTube community, like a Google Plus thing. That was something I was when I first kind of was coming out of religion and I didn't talk to anyone locally, so I'm like got to go on the internet and find people to argue with. And there's the G Plus thing where you can get on and they do the hangouts and talk to people. And so there's some weird people on there.
Oh yeah.
And I had not ever heard of the flat Earth thing, but it's real big with some people there. And there's they tend to be also, in my experience, have been people that also do not think we landed on the moon. They think that was all made up. And there are a lot of more conspiracy theory kind of things. So, but it's one of those things that you think that there could not be people that really believe that, but there is. And apparently it's getting more popular, or at least they're talking about it more. November
9 and 10, they held the Flat Earth International Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina.
I think I saw some video from that, yeah.
With about 400 people in attendance flying in from around the world.
Wow.
What is absolutely ironic with that, if you fly between the US and Europe, all of those flights go through the same path. You go up towards Nova Scotia, you fly along the southern tip of Greenland, and then you come in over Ireland. All of the flights across the North Atlantic do that same route, because it's shortest following the curvature of the Earth.
Right.
And around the southern tip of Greenland, you can actually start to see some of the effects of that. I got to see that flying to Britain on the International Air Cadet Exchange when it was around midnight. I looked out the window and I saw night, sunset, and day. All at one time, just looking out. As you looked out across towards the horizon, I was in nighttime. North of me was the sunset, and north of that was still daytime.
Yeah.
It was crazy to see.
Right.
You can see effects like that. If you've got people flying from Australia to the US, they're flying across the Pacific. It's a long-ass flight. Well, in the flat Earth model, you've got the North Pole at the center of the world and an ice wall around the edge.
So I don't know that much about it, but like, how do things not fall off of the Earth if they're flat?
There's an ice wall. And
so people just hit the ice wall sometimes?
If you were to try to go across Antarctica, you would get to the ice wall.
But nobody goes there?
Because it's frozen.
So
why is anybody going to go there?
Well, I don't know. You would think somebody would be like, well, I'm just going to do it. And then they're going to be up. We hit it the end, guys. It's like on the Truman Show when he's trying to get out of the dome and he hits the thing and he's like, wait, I can't. Then it would be solved. It would be.
Now, if you do this, the southern ends of the oceans are ridiculously huge, which would mean the South Pacific would be probably 3 or 4 times the size that it actually is. And a flight from Australia to North Carolina, which is probably going to be through LA, would take 2 or 3 times as long because you're having to go way, way, way around. Flights from Europe are nice and short. Between Europe and North America, they're nice and short, like flat earthers would suspect they are, with the North Pole at the center.
Right.
Short distance across. Yeah, it is relatively short distance, but with the flat Earth, it would actually be shorter. But if it's truly international,
right?
How do you fly from southern areas?
Well, what is the? I guess I'm thinking, what would be the reason? Like, because I'm assuming they think that there's some kind of conspiracy that keeps this from everybody from knowing this. So what would be the benefit of having this conspiracy? Like, why do they realize or think that it's perpetuated?
To think the government is cooler than it is.
Oh, so it's similar to like the NASA thing. It's like they just want to keep us ignorant so they can do what they want to do, which seems like and it seems a lot of those people I've heard are like 9/11 was all us. We all did that. And then the shooting in, which I can't remember, the one where the guy at the elementary school, like that didn't really happen.
Newtown.
Yeah, like all of this stuff didn't really happen. The government did it all, and but it seems like there's this common thing that they're trying to find all these reasons that nobody knows what's really going on, and we have to stay alert because all this stuff that we're believing is, which I think there's some, validity to the things that we probably really don't know as much as we would like to know about what's going on beneath, behind closed doors. But yeah.
But it's the whole flat earth thing. I don't get how you can be that stupid. It's not a matter of ignorance, because I don't know how it's not intuitive.
Yeah.
The Earth appears in a very, very short range, very small scale to be flat.
Yeah.
When your scale goes up much beyond that, like if you're anywhere in the Western US,
right,
the scale of the world you're in is a couple 100 miles.
Right.
And if you drive with a couple 100 miles, you can see the effect of the curvature.
Right. Well, it seems like probably the problem is that it was easier to believe that we were the center of the universe because we didn't have any other way to test anything outside of it, and when you had communication or the ability to travel was very limited, those kind of ideas can kind of stay.
Except humans have known the world isn't flat for at least 3,500 years, bare minimum 2,500. The size, like the diameter around the equator, has been known for 2,500 years with a high degree of accuracy. The world being round has been well known for a very, very long time. And yeah, you drive, say, from Boise to Bend on US 20, you're constantly seeing the effects of the curvature of the Earth. Yes, elevation is going up and down. There's a lot of flat places, and as you drive, like between Burns and Bend, there are places where it's pretty flat, and as you drive, mountains start rising up. It's not that they are starting out small and getting bigger. It's you see the top, and then you see a little bit lower, and you see a little lower, and you see a little lower as you round the curvature of the Earth.
Yeah, that's true.
In Malheur County, you head out towards Vail. You can see that with the Cottonwood Mountains. You head out across the range, and it's just these rolling hills, and then these mountains start to rise up top down as you move closer. You head towards the Tetons if you're headed to the east. Same thing. You see the top of the mountains first, and then you see further down.
See, but I guess I can understand on some level, because until now, when you're explaining it to me that way, that makes sense that that's because of the curvature. But I don't know that I would have been like, oh, here we go. This is obviously disproving the fact, it's just like if you've never looked at it as like, this is why this is happening. I guess I could see just not even really factoring that in. But you would think if they are flat earthers, they would have been like, okay, looking at information about it. So they probably would have picked up on that. But
maybe I'm weird, and that I figured that out by the time I was 5.
Oh, yeah.
And asked questions. Why is it that as we move towards the mountains, we see the top first and then further down? I had it clearly figured out by the time I was 5.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Like, I actually remember marveling as a 6 or 7 or 8-year-old driving across, getting to see the effects in flat areas of the curvature where you can actually see only so far and then it drops off.
Yeah. I just remember as a kid wondering, like, why does the moon always seem to, it's like following us, like, I don't know what that has to do with anything, but looking out the car window as a kid and being like, it's following us. Like, why does it never go anywhere else? I had lots of questions. I do remember also as a kid thinking about eternity, and now I realize it was probably a more sophisticated question than because I was realizing the absurdity of the idea of and thinking that if I go to heaven and it's eternity and we're gonna be there forever, like even if it wasn't, I really hoped it wasn't the situation we're gonna be worshiping for eternity, because that seemed like torture to me. But even if I could think about all these things that I would want to do, like talk to all these people and learn all these things, but I was like, eventually there'll be nothing left to do. And then I will get bored, and then God will get mad, and I can't pretend. He'll know that I'm bored, and then he'll get pissed. And that kind of gave me anxiety as a kid. Like, I didn't know how I was going to deal with eternity. So yeah. So I think, you're like, as a kid, you can kind of start to, but if you're in an environment where questions are not encouraged, and you're not encouraged to be like, wait, this doesn't make sense, you never totally go on that route. You just kind of have the, you don't know, but then you kind of say, oh, God's mysterious, and, we don't ever really understand it. And then you can kind of put it out of your mind, I guess. So maybe that's how it works for those too.
Yeah, I'm looking at a model of the flat Earth here, with the only way to get from Australia to the U.S. would be to cross Eurasia and parts of Africa.
All right. Okay. Now,
and they don't even have North and South America connected.
Huh.
Oh, that's weird. Oh, so crazy. Anyway, flat earthers, they're real. They're insane. We're out of time for this week. Kylie will be back sometime. The interview that we'll be recording with her immediately after I hit stop will be the wild card that will go next week if the baby's early, or later if we need a break.
Right.
So that's it for this week. Kylie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for letting me come on.
And remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.